Hi, lovelies. Welcome to LLAMASTE. This is episode 2 of the podcast, which was brought to you by Pistachio Llama. My name is Stella, and I am your host throughout these series. LLAMASTE is a feel-good podcast for pet parents. At LLAMASTE, we share our stories, learn from each other, and be vulnerable as a collective family, all within the comfort of a podcast series. Now, in today's podcast, I want to start off by I can't apologize enough for not being organized. Number one, yes, not being organized. And it was by experiencing technical issues. But again, if I had been organized, then we would have released episode 1 of the podcast as we had previously planned and advised all of you, which was the Tuesday, 7th of May, instead of releasing it on the Monday morning, 13th of May. So a week later. But one very important thing which I've learned from this is that planning and time management is so important and gets you so much further than being a yes person. So by saying no to things which don't fit within your plans, you aren't being a bad person. You are actually looking out for yourself. And by looking out for yourself, you are in turn looking out for others. Because if you get all the stuff that you need to get done, then you can then be there for other people with whatever they need from you. So, kicking off today's session, we are going to be talking about food for thought. So, that is the title of this episode, and that is what we are talking about. Today's story is brought to us by the lovely June the Groodle, and we thank them so much for their contribution. Now, June's story is something that we can all learn from because whilst it isn't something that's funny, it is something that can happen to any of us being pet parent at any given time. Fingers crossed, touch wood, it doesn't. But we need to be aware that accidents happen. Also for our rant session / comedy session, it's not going to be either, but we are going to be sticking with the theme of food for thought. So I'm going to be talking and sharing my experiences of what it's like owning a rescue dog. And yes, it is a bit of a slippery slide, but for anyone out there considering adoption versus buying a puppy from a reputable breeder, this is hopefully something that will help you make the decision for you. So, getting into today's story, June the Groodle. Now, this incident happened while June was on holiday with her family at Avoca Beach. So that's mum, dad, kids, and June's 13-year-old brother, Ziggy. Now, it was a 5-day holiday starting from Thursday evening and ending on Tuesday morning. Sunday morning, June and Mum went to the doggy market, and come Monday morning, June started to get sick and started vomiting. Now, originally, the parents took Ziggy, the senior dog, to the vet since he hurt his leg running around at the beach, and June decided to steal the show by eating a sock. Now, at first, the vets didn't have time to look at June, so they only looked at Ziggy. But come Monday morning, Mum and Dad are rushing June to the emergency vet at 5 a.m. as she was maliciously vomiting the whole way there. It turns out after the vets had investigated that yes, June did eat a sock and she had to have surgery and stay at the emergency vets for a few days during the first part of her recovery, which was also the most difficult part of her recovery. After staying there for 4 days, she was well enough to come home, thankfully. 4 days is a pretty short period of time, as during that time, she also had pneumonia and sepsis, which is blood poisoning. But thankfully, June is safe at home with her family. I will also share this part of the story with you. At first, the vets weren't sure what was happening with June. They said it could have been a blockage in her intestines, but they weren't sure. She got an anti-nausea shot and then they called it a day. The vet said that if she continued vomiting, she would need to go to the emergency vets, which happened the next day, to see if there was a blockage, since the original vet was booked out for a few days. So, whenever you are planning a family holiday, I know that these kind of emergencies and health scares aren't at the top of your mind. You are planning a holiday to get away from it and to enjoy yourself. But you also need to be aware of your closest vet for if anything like this happens. June, Ada Sock needed to have emergency surgery to have it removed. Ziggy broke his leg, injured his leg running at the beach. Accidents happen. Even though you don't want to be thinking about it, because thinking about it brings accidents upon you, so don't think about it, but always be prepared. Always know where your local or closest vet is, the times that they are opened. If they're closed, what is your plan B? Now, speaking of plan Bs, rescue dogs. So when I originally started thinking about getting a dog, like I grew up with dogs pretty much all through our childhood. We've had all different breeds, all different sizes. But lately we've had pretty much large dogs, but in the form of golden retrievers, even had a Doberman, which I was very close to, and I love Dobermans. Like they're one of my most favorite breeds. But at the time, still living in a one-bedroom apartment in Sydney, I was like, well, Doberman is probably not the best choice for me. So I started looking around, like what's out there for sale, the breeders. Keep in mind, this was around COVID. This was around COVID or shortly after COVID. So breeders were charging ridiculous amounts per puppy. Like we are talking 10,000 plus, especially if you mention to them that for example, one of the breeds I was looking at was a Cocker Spaniel, a dark chocolate Cocker Spaniel. This breeder girl I was talking to, I was like, oh, since you want a chocolate Cocker Spaniel, that's going to set you back even more. Like my puppies usually start off at 7K, but since you want a chocolate one, it's going to cost, I don't know how much she mentioned, like 8K or something. It was a crazy amount of money to be spending on a puppy. And then the whole idea of spending money like buying a life, it kind of started to disagree with me. And I was like, hold on, like we are paying so much to buy a life. Like this is wrong. So then I started looking around at shelters, and being in Sydney at the time, I was living like close to the central business district, but like towards the east side. So there were quite a few good shelters around, and the dogs there were going so quickly, especially the smaller ones. So I kind of, I guess, got myself into this mental state of like, oh, once I found a dog that I liked, like saw the photo, I had to jump on it and I had to go get it. And I kind of admittedly rushed into things a little bit here. And yes, adopting a rescue dog, you're not buying, you're kind of getting yourself a jack in the box. Especially because a lot of the dogs at the rescue centers, at the pounds, number one, the breeds are all different. They're mixed. They're kind of like, well, with my dog, they were like, oh, he's a Kelpie cross Whippet, so he's going to be like a small to medium size. Turns out he's more of a large dog. He's probably not a Whippet cross, more like a Greyhound cross. That's something. So that's something to keep in mind when you're adopting a dog, and if size is very important to you, then make sure that maybe you are getting a full-grown dog instead of a puppy, or if you are getting a puppy, then it is more a pure breed puppy, or something that you can kind of point to and be like, oh yeah, that's a poodle, or yeah, that's a Kelpie, etc., etc. So number one, you are kind of getting a jack in the box when it comes to size and height. The other the other Jack in the Box part of it is you don't know what everything they've been through. Even the puppies, like I was told that Ruben, my dog, was 9 months old, but looking back at the videos and watching his growth spurt and just him growing up and maturing in general. So I've had him for, I think, close to 2 years now. Watching him grow up, I firmly believe he was more around the 6 month age. So 6 months rather than originally being told 9 months. So you got to take that into perspective as well. So as I was saying, even though you are getting your puppy from the pound, you still don't know what everything they've been through and how it's affected them emotionally. For example, how long they were with their mother throughout that crucial period, which is like the 4, 6 to 8 week period of their life where when they're with their mother, with their brothers and sisters, learning social skills. For example, with my dog, he's been kicked out of every single daycare center he's been to. And it's not because he is a bad dog. He's just doesn't get the social cues. Like he doesn't get dogs telling him no, stop, enough is enough. He is very much a playful puppy. And maybe maybe it has something to do with him being a Kelpie cross where they're so high energy, and so are Whippets or greyhounds, but they're more kind of in short spurts. So I'm thinking it's more of the Kelpie energy coming through where he just doesn't stop. And that was also something I had no idea about. So I didn't know I was getting this hyper energetic puppy. So if you maybe if you have certain health issues and you can't go for a walk all the time or for a run, then yes, maybe it's better for you to be more cautious when it comes to adopting a puppy. But all in all, look, as I said, I've had Ruben for close to 2 years now, and I'm in love with him. So there is no way that I could give him up again, even through the initial stages of having him for the first few weeks, the first few months. Yes, it was hard. Yes, I was dreading opening the door at the end of the day, coming home from work and opening the door. I was dreading that part of my day, like, oh my God, what am I going to find behind these doors? And most of the time it was actually okay, but there were a few times when I just wanted to close the door and never return. But that also comes with owning a puppy. So you need to consider all these factors. Do you adopt? Do you not adopt? Do you actually even buy a puppy? Or get a puppy, adopt a puppy, or do you adopt a full-size, full-grown dog, an adult dog? There are some amazing senior dogs out there who are just so full of love and will be grateful to you for having them in a comfortable home, in a loving home for the rest of their days. So there's a lot of things to consider. Health-wise, if you're worried about whether or not dogs from the pound are healthy, health-wise, so far what I've seen, if you are worried about any sort of diseases, they will let you know at the pounds whether the dog has any specific diseases or sicknesses, whether they're vulnerable in any certain way. They will let you know all that at the pound. Also, if you're someone who likes to keep their dog up to date with all their jabs, then they also provide you with a full list of all the vaccinations that they've had. Then again, if you're someone who doesn't like their dogs getting vaccinated, this is something that might turn you off of rescue dogs. saying that though, they're not unhealthy dog. Not every dog at the pound is going to be sick or there is going to be something wrong with them. There's actually a lot of dogs there, especially at the moment with the economic situation, that there is nothing wrong with the dog. The owners just unfortunately couldn't look after the dog any longer. Or sometimes people get a dog and they have no idea what they are getting themselves into. And same goes for cats. If you are looking to get a cat, there are so many cats at the pound. I had a neighbor when I was living in Sydney, and he adopted 2 cats. The first cat unfortunately passed away. He had health issues, but he was in a terrible accident where he was actually the third cat who fell off the balcony. We had this balcony that pretty much, and this ledge that connected all the apartments on our floor, and we lived on the third level of the building. But because it was an old I believe it was an old industrial but converted building, the third level was more like the fifth level, so it was quite high off the ground, and he was actually the third cat who fell off the balcony. And although he survived the initial fall, he did pass away later from health complications. But this cat was already riddled with other complications as well. For example, he was HIV positive, and my neighbor was aware of this going into it. He was fully aware this was all disclosed to him. But then he did end up adopting a second cat. So people who adopt, even for myself, once I've adopted a dog, I believe even second time around I would probably adopt. Like, it just kind of makes you feel better about yourself in a way, like you are helping a creature that actually needs your help. Now, I'm not saying that breeders need to be made redundant, they're not needed. Look, if you are someone who has specific requirements, then yes, go to a breeder, but also do all your thorough background research about that breeder. Like, we've also had puppies from reputable breeder, and we thought we did enough research, or just by the breeder claiming that they're reputable, they had all these certifications, blah, 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 blah. We thought they were, and then the dogs ended up passing away from issues that were probably most likely genetic. And there was literally nothing that the vets or we could have done for them, unfortunately. So I hope I've given you some food for thought to think about. And I hope that you've once again enjoyed this episode of LLAMASTE. Look out on our Instagram and our TikTok pages where we've announced our massive giveaway. Give us a like, give us a follow. See you next time. Peace and light.